similarly, I would need a dollar figure split between what we're funding to pay the state assessment. If we're not just paying it,
Sure.
we need a
split.
split.
Certainly, you know what that number is. You know,
Oh,
you have a pretty good idea what retiree health insurance is going to be next year. I don't personally, but somebody does.
All right, so we need some numbers in terms of.
So I mean, this sounds like a great way to maybe get up to the 500, because I think we might be a little short. If we have about 300 in there now, and we're proposing 150 or 140 or thereabouts, that, you know, we're a little short there. So I think we need some numbers before we can vote a recommendation.
Why don't we bring this back Monday night as well? It gives us a few days here to get the right numbers on that piece, as well as the number on the transfer from the stabilization fund. That's the other number you need.
Right. Lee Michael. And then there were some other questions too, Steve, too. Lee Michael?
The article references a Massachusetts general law that dictates the creation of this trust fund. Does that general law give the town the ability to invest the money in the way that you were describing earlier? Or is that a separate authorization from town meeting that is required in order to say how you can invest the money?
I don't know the answer to the top of my head. I'll check that out for you.
Okay.
Steve?
Rick, whose care will this trust fund be under? The Board of Selectmen or the Retirement Board or the Treasurer? And what the article say so?
Well, let's see. Let me check with town council on that.
So the proposed trust fund does not have a requirement for contribution, a fixed amount every year, does it? It wouldn't be set up that way, right?
No, no.
No. So you could put in 1, 2, 3, 400, whatever you wanted to do.
That's correct. I mean, I know the committee in the past was talking about 1/6 of 1%, 1/6 of 1%.
Yes.
It was a policy, I think, but not a legal requirement.
Right. I mean, it was a guideline,
Right.
and we're using that this year to formulate the contribution. So.
Ted, one
Okay.
question for you.
Steve.
If we're going to put part of the retiree health care into this, would we not have to move this up in the sequence so that this account is set up before we vote general insurance? Or
Yes, we would. Yeah, we'd have to move. We'd have to move that. Now, paying the, I mean, the state assessment is a non-appropriated expense, so there's no article there to worry about that split, but it would be nice to know what that split was, because that's what gets you to the $500,000 requirement. But yes, for the group insurance, if we're going to split that up, we certainly need to vote these other articles before group insurance. So yeah, depending on where the numbers are, maybe this can we set up this trust with a number less than 500,000?
You can set up, you just can't join the state fund.
So this article is useful even if we're a little short,
Yes.
So we got to establish it.
because then as when it hits that mark, then it could be transferred, and it could be transferred without any additional action on the part
Well, I
of the
think that's
town.
Lee's question. I need to check on Lee. Lee asked that question. Anita.
Darnell?
No, that answered the question, because what it does is it allows us to establish the fund in a vote. And then, in the secondary vote, establish its source of funding. So as long as we get it established early, and we can figure out where we're gonna acquire those fundings after.
So that it wouldn't be that as important to redirect group insurance money this year, if we were just setting it up.
If you're just going to set it up and not fund it, but otherwise, there's going to be an expense involved in setting up, you are going to need some funding mechanism, and there is a lot of fiduciary responsibility, the same way the retirement board has fiduciary responsibility. I certainly wouldn't want to be responsible for investing those funds myself, so you're going to need some vehicle to invest them.
You certainly could set it up the first year, though. You could set
it up, yeah.
You could set it up and you can fund it based upon,
Put it in a savings account, I guess, yeah. Right.
as the rest of the other investments are. I mean, 500,000 in this market is not gonna earn much anyways.
Well, invested in print, it will.
In print it will, but you don't have a material amount of money.
Right, and if you went into a regular trust and put it with with a brokerage house someplace, and there are brokerage houses that do this, but again, I think there's a little more risk involved because you're the only one in that.
I think the approach to take would be a short term, because the intent is to switch it over to the state funds. So
Yeah.
your short-term investments you're talking about is probably less than 10 basis points.
Probably.
And so if you're talking less than 10 basis points, we're not talking any kind of,
Right, but my point is, if we don't have quite 500 saved, or earmarked, or whatever you want, for qualifying it for the state service, then we at least can pass the article, have it set up for $450,000, earn a slower rate of interest, and then when we do get the money in there, great.
that's correct.
But if I need to go to print in about a week, and I'm not waiting around for a split of group insurance monies that might or might not be forthcoming. Darnell?
Right now, if you say your number with Amy was about 300,000 something, three something?
I think so. Does anybody have a warrant? Yeah, the last year's
No, I'm
warrant.
just saying rough. And you talk, we have here slated another 147, so we're actually talking maybe like 53,000 difference right now.
Right.
Maybe.
We can take it out of snow and ice.
No, I ain't taking out snow. Take some somewhere. It was 50 degrees today. No, but
The fat one?
town report.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying, so
I got time.
I think we'll be safe if I do it, because why incur additional expense this year setting up this temporary parking place? Let's spend a minute and find the money.
So find the money.
Yeah, spend a minute and find the money.
Because you're so close.
Because it's 50, we have, I mean, because we're gonna, I don't know, it's gonna cost us to set up a separate brokerage and everything else
No, I need
to deal with this.
I need the warrant. The stabilization fund article from last spring should have a balance as of about 1 year ago, and then we added 100,000 to it, so that,
Well, here's what we'll do. We'll come back Monday night with the number. We'll talk to the town accountant and finalize.
See how
the
quickly
number.
she can get the number. I mean, I think that's what you're worried
That's what
about.
we're,
Yeah.
If she can get it quickly, we should.
okay. We're at 383,986,
20,000.
okay, after last year's contribution. And add a small amount of interest, and we're proposing 143, so we're over the top.
You're over.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right?
Change
So,
We found it.
so we found it.
That's what I'm saying.
All right. So this is good. We can move forward. If there are refinements that benefit us in the way of putting money in there faster through group insurance, that would be great. I'd love to hear about it. But we can go ahead as we are with this, and we can get the specific number from Amy and vote this thing on Monday.
That sounds like a plan.
Great. All right. Moving on.
All right, so the last one is the Information Technology Committee. And this calls for 5 members, and this also was in the Department of Revenue report. It was item number 7, identified on pages 13 and 14. There has been a committee in the past that sort of went by the sort of just disappeared, for lack of a better word. So this is really creating in the bylaws, really a reconstituted technology committee, and we think this is critical across the town in terms of what the town's needs are. And we described in terms of the importance in terms of developing a strategic plan and providing advice and recommendations to town boards and commissions, and to assist in the evaluation. So we think this is an area where the town has not been able to keep up, and we think this is critically needed, and there are a lot of smart people in town that we think can be enlisted to support this effort and serve on the committee.
Sounds great to me. In the interim between establishment of this committee and whatever happened to the last one, I do know that various people on the town school coordinating committee managed to do a great job coming up with a recommendation for some new town-wide financial software. Are you going to rely on any of their expertise in this?
Yeah, I think they're making an
Forward.
excellent effort. I think that makes sense to take advantage of that. So this is, and that's great that that's going on. I mean, that's the kind of thing we like to see, but we think this should focus on across the board in terms of what the town-wide plans are and involve all the town departments.
Great. So this article also included a question about seeing what sum of money the town will vote to appropriate for the purposes of this article.
This was originally drafted way, I guess, back before the consultant study. And I'm not sure of the status of the study right now, the RFP.
That's right. I think the Warrant Committee recommended in some meeting, someone provided $50,000 for a study.
That was an item in the selectmen's budget last year.
And it was passed.
It was
the
passed and funded, yep.
The Town General Study Committee, I believe, already drafted an RFP. It went out. The single bid or so, whatever it was, wasn't satisfactory, so an award has not been made. Is that money still available? Yeah, so, but it's in the budget.
To my knowledge, John, I don't, you know.
Well,
My lead to is
it's
that
gonna go back.
it will revert to the general fund unless your recommendation appropriates it.
So this would be reappropriating the $50,000 that has not been expended. And this committee would help get that going.
Interesting. If $50,000 wasn't going to do the job, okay, I have some responses back here, but if $50,000 wasn't going to do the job, then you're looking for more than that, presumably now. So,
The committee maybe.
okay, so I'd like to hear from Katie first. Thank you.
So we were just caucusing here. The one possibility for the $50,000 would be to apply that towards the request from the Town School Consolidation Committee for the software package, which is currently in the Capital Committee's non-bonded capital recommendation for about, what, 160, Tom? 160. So it's possible that that 50 could be applied towards that, or maybe it just flows back to free cash and gets, and then there's an appropriation next year to this committee if they seek one. But that's one option that we talked about.
Well, that certainly has a certain amount of appeal, because we know that that's a solid expense, as opposed to, let's give $50,000 to a committee and see what happens. So was there beyond any specific scope of action for this committee to take that might cost a lot of money?
Well, the issue was developing a
consultants?
strategic plan. I mean, that was the
Okay.
goal, was to guide this process and run this process and get this strategic plan going and coming up with the recommendations. So that was the intent here. Hey, Lori. Hey. So this is one of our authors of some of this IT technology committee. Your timing is great. Okay, so we're talking about the 50 grand, if you didn't hear.
I heard. So last year, welcome Leroy. Last year you came before us and spoke passionately for the $50,000 IT study. And so, which I guess the 50,000 should have been a little more in order to get that off the ground. But maybe you want to tell us about it?
Apparently, but
Okay.
I think that this committee has the potential to continue this work and actually succeed where we did not. We drafted an RFP, we went out to bid, and the number of bids and the quality of the bids that we got was not satisfactory, as I understand it. That doesn't diminish at all the need for an overall technology strategic plan, which was the thrust of the recommendation, which was the thrust of the RFP, and which we believe this committee will help to advance. So I think there's some real benefit. I don't see it as giving $50,000 to some committee and seeing what will happen. I think the charge here is quite clear, and we would hope that with the expertise of the committee, that they could in fact engage consultants where needed to generate this plan. And we've been very specific. As you can see, we've essentially replicated the terms of the RFP in this article. So I think there's a real benefit and a pressing need to ensure that there's a lot more integration across the town and the schools regarding where we're headed in terms of technology. While I think the recommendation of the Town School Consolidation Committee was very important, none of those individuals have any information technology expertise. I think they identified a problem, and the software will solve that problem, which is let's replace some software that's about 15 years old. That was a good recommendation. I think we should do it. And the school committee voted $160,000 for that purpose. So I think we've got that covered. I think it's important, though, to make sure that this committee has some ability to engage a consultant. So I'm advocating that we do retain those funds for that purpose.
Okay, I've got a bunch of interlocutors here, Steve and then Darnell. But you mentioned the school committee voted the $160,000? You mean the
Right.
Capital Improvement Planning Committee, or
Yeah.
both?
No, the schools voted that to fund $160,000 of that request for year one. So that's the first phase of that plan, and I think it includes three modules of the 5.
Okay, so that's the same $160,000 that's on the Capital Improvement
Correct.
Planning Committee request?
Correct.
Thank you. Steve?
So it's pretty easy to predict that this committee is gonna say that our IT's not well enough integrated, it's too old, and it's not well enough funded. So I hope that this group will look at the business model we've established with consolidated facilities, where there's different little bits of money have been pecked off of budgets and put into one place. And it requires, leadership, so they're gonna have to find somebody that will be in charge of this. But we've already had this successful model, and it's worked because we've provided more funding, and because the affected departments have ceded a little bit of their responsibility and a little bit of their cash into that office. And rather than reinventing the wheel, I think that's given us good return, and I think that's something that they ought to look at hard.
Couldn't agree more.
We do have an information technology department.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see that this committee would be replacing their function in terms of helping the town. So you were
It's no joint.
suggesting that the model in place was consolidated facilities.
Correct.
I don't,
We don't have one IT that serves the whole town. We have, an underfunded IT that serves part of it. The schools have their own. But, so many of the different programs come in and say that we need this or we need that piece of equipment or this software. And a larger oversight that just says, here's all the money we have, let's make some decisions on where we're gonna invest this, and then go from there. But the money is always the thing,
Right.
obviously,
right.
so.
But I think the IT department could play a
Sure.
significant role, especially, perhaps maybe under the guidance of this committee.
Yeah.
Or in collaboration with that committee. Darnell?
As an IT guy and someone who does this stuff, is the purchase or the going out for this software, identifying this software, putting the cart before the horse? And I ask that question because you're asking for a study to be done across the entire.
Are we talking about the
No, I'm asking about.
software, the financial software?
Yeah,
that
that's
is-
going on, because if you're asking consultants to come in and say, take a look at the whole town, see what we need, see what's going on, and I'm not sure because I was a part of that, see what's going on in the town, and then make recommendations to tie the whole town in. Are we kind of putting the cart before the horse and looking at a certain piece of software right now and say, okay, we're going to spend 160, whatever it is, $1,000 on that software?
It's phase one.
It's still $160,000. 1, 2, 3, it don't matter. But, and then asking the committee to come in and retrofit their suggestions around that purchase, because we're not gonna just not use it if we order it, purchase it. Or, should we basically establish this committee, which I think we definitely need for a long time, put a strategic plan together, and then look at, yes, this is either the package we need, or maybe there's a better package out there. I don't know. I'm asking a question because if you're gonna bring a consultant in and ask them about, and say, okay, we're gonna use this software, we bought it yesterday, you cut the legs out from underneath them. So, I don't know. Somebody can help me out with that, people who've been working with
I
this.
can help, and Anne Marie can give me support.
Okay.
I think that's a fair question. I think, though, the answer is no. Is it putting the cart before the horse? The reason is that I think that the Town School Consolidation Committee did do some due diligence regarding what the needs were in that particular area. But more importantly, what we heard from the current vendor is that their system in 3 years will not be usable at all. So we had to make a decision, and it was a time-sensitive decision. So in that regard, I think we made the right decision, and we're moving forward, and I think this software that we're purchasing will do the job that we need it to do. But I don't think that constrains the consultant in any significant way at all, or the committee, because if you look at the scope that we're requesting from the committee, it's much broader. And going back to Steve's point, while we do have 2 and arguably 3 different information technology departments within town, those being the town IT department, the school's IT department, and the library IT, somebody's making those decisions over there. I think that has to have more coordination. It has to have more horizontal and vertical integration. So I think that there's a lot of work for this committee to do. It's forward-looking. It's going to take some time. And hopefully there's work for a consultant, because I'm not sure that we can depend on these volunteers, no matter how talented they are, to do the kind of work that we're talking about here, but hopefully they can provide the leadership that we need. So I think that we're addressing this time-sensitive need in the best way we can, but I don't think that software purchase will constrain either this committee or a consultant if they engage one.
Can I follow up real quick?
Please.
And Roy, I do agree with that, and what you're saying, and I definitely want the folks at home to understand that there are very few programs such as this to run cities and towns. So whereas I'm asking a question for the home viewing audience as well as for here, that they understand that there are very few municipal planning programs that can handle the finances and stuff for the town. So we do understand that, and I wanted to bring that out because I think there will be a number of questions out there if we did not ask that question, and that was not addressed.
I appreciate that.
So, let me understand this. do I have a proposal that for a committee and an initial sum to get it going in terms of hiring consultants?
And that sum is the sum that we had allocated for the RFP, fund the RFP if it was successful. And it's there. It's there until the end of the year, anyway.
And, okay, I've got Lee Michael and then Michael. Mike.
That wasn't the way that I read the article as written, so I wonder if a language change would be needed, because I thought that the way that the article read was that we were empowering that committee to later request funds from town meeting, as opposed to fund it now. That very last sentence seems to indicate that the committee will annually request a sum.
Okay, so part of it is the way that these articles get written. The language is a little arcane and probably could use an overhaul, you know.
Or perhaps I misread it. But.
Because it's always that last line that talks about the dollars attached to the vision in the rest of the paragraph. And it is separated with
It's separated by that semicolon, so the intention was for...
Let's not go into punctuation.
That's the separation from the annual.
Source of it.
And anyway, so yeah, it would have been perhaps helpful for our purposes if when these articles get presented, you know, if you know what the amount of money is, put the amount of money on the article, you know, tell us up front. So this article is looking for $50,000, but the $50,000 is already floating in the system. So I'm not sure how it gets appropriated out of the selectmen's budget. But
Transfer it out. You can do a transfer
transfer,
from the other article.
And the sum of $50,000 be appropriated, and to meet said appropriation.
right, from a prior year.
From
The prior year.
Current year,
Okay, great. So the money's sitting there. It's theoretically under the control of the selectmen, and I don't see any of them raising their hand. Oh, I do. Great.
Ted, we think you would just treat it as an available fund, as was just said, and transfer it. But we don't have any objection to the $50,000 being transferred for this purpose rather than for the financial software, since it's already in the capital committee's non-bonded recommendation. The only question is it going to be sufficient? The amounts that we were, when we went out for the RFP and we talked with other towns, what we were told was that you really need, you're talking 100, 125 is what's really needed. That's what other towns estimated for their cost, and were able to get multiple bids in that range. We only had one bid, and it's from our current vendor, because our amount was $50,000. So that's just a question. Is the 50, we as a Board of Selectmen don't object to the $50,000 being used for this purpose and transferred. The question is it sufficient for this committee to work with?
Find out.
I don't know, but that's what we tried last year. So let's see, I had Michael, and then Darnell again, and then Phil, and then Betty. Jeez.
My question about this was, I'm imagining 350 towns in Massachusetts, probably 30 of them about the same size as Milton, doing the same kind of stuff as Milton. And I wonder why all these towns have to spend $100,000 to solve, you hire a consultant to solve a problem. Why can't we just get Needham's report and read a couple of them and pick a way to go with IT for less than $50,000?
Every town has done things differently. I mean, you have to look at the different models. There is a town, somebody was asking about centralized, Andover, for example, did consolidate everything. And there was an article in one of the municipal, and I think, Tom, you passed that article on to me, about the town of Andover IT department they created. But every town, unfortunately, has had experiences of different governance. So the governance is different, the fragmentation is different, and these type of departments there's nothing that is similar. So you wouldn't,
You would think, randomly, someone must have done something very close to us. I don't know. Because it's hard, the $50,000 is kind of you hear it's a number we can't get somebody for, but you can't really find out what the number actually is.
We need an IT committee.
So I would be voting, I'd be in favor of just waiting and seeing what they come up with next year. rather than say, here's $50,000 now, because we don't know exactly.
Okay, I've got Darnell, and then Phil, and then Betty.
My question goes along with what Mike was basically saying. The $50,000 is to start up the committee and get them flowing on getting ideas and telling us what the actual appropriation should be to get this stuff done. Because like you said maybe 150, maybe 100, maybe 125. The folks we had give you those estimates originally, it wasn't enough. It turned out to be not enough. So if we're going to formulate this committee, give them some seed money in which to start doing their research and understanding, getting a better understanding what the town actually needs and the type of people we need to bring in to best evaluate other systems and services that we're lacking. I don't see where $50,000 wouldn't be a seed point, and then come back to us with an appropriation maybe if we look at next year or whatever with that number. Because we already have the software coming in, we have the stuff, certain things already happening. We got to get a chance to get in, meet, and figure out what's actually going on. I guess that, to me, $50,000 would be a great seed point, a start point. And then whatever it comes out to be to have, the consultant, whether it be one or a company that has a group of consultants come in and do a full study, we don't know yet because the work wasn't finished the first time. So we don't want to just keep throwing good money after, half-baked suggestions, I guess I'll put it.
No, well, we don't want to throw it away, that's for sure. Phil?
Well, obviously, I support this article. I sit on the committee that submitted it to you. But I do have some problems with the $50,000 appropriation. My understanding is that the town of Dedham put out an RFP very similar to the one that we put out, and that they ended up with a $150,000 plan. So this money is not going to get anywhere near the kind of study that we should expect this committee to give us. I don't know what $50,000 is a lot of money for seed money. And without a clear idea of how that money would be spent, I would be loath to support it at this time. This committee, if it's approved, probably won't even get fully appointed in meeting and having their first meeting for months, many months. And I think there's probably productive work that they can do in their first year to come back to the town with a plan for a full study. Once they've done some due diligence to figure out what the situation is here now with IT and with the various departments that are involved in it, and come back with a recommendation for an amount of money and a study that we can look at and we can approve, rather than putting $50,000 out now and assuming they're going to come back at some point with a study which will cost whatever it costs. So I think we're rushing it.
Thank you. Betty?
I had a question more to do with the makeup of the committee that you're proposing, because it's very different than the makeup of the committee for the audit committee, where you're specifically asking for certain kinds of people with certain kinds of experience who are not employed by the town of Milton or on a part of a government entity. But this particular article doesn't have any of those specifics. Just wondering what your thinking was as to why they don't have any of those restrictions in them.
Well, first of all, the intent was to get a broad representation by having, again, representation from the school department as well as the Board of Selectmen side, so it was really trying to cross and cover all areas of government. At the same time, the limitations that you saw in the audit article were really looking again, towards the independents. And this didn't have the same focus on independence. It was really hoping to have a representation and a skill set.
So someone could be appointed to this committee that is employed by the schools or employed by the town who has information technology experience?
Well, theoretically, they could be. I mean, you would hope they would be already volunteering this, not volunteering, but offering their information and advice already as an employee without having to be on the committee.
Okay.
Darnell?
Along with what Betty's asking, are we looking at or envisioning that maybe the school IT, head of school IT, and maybe the head of town IT be part of this here study committee, or because that's where a lot of information gonna be drummed up or pulled from. So, I mean, we usually have town professionals sit on a number of our boards who have intimate knowledge of the systems we're evaluating. And I'm wondering if we're envisioning having those folks sit on the committee as well to offer their expertise and their understanding of what we actually have in place.
They would be
As
sources.
in the past, it would be expected that those school and town staff people would sit in with the committee.
We met with those
And be the staff
folks.
of the committee.
So we have met with them, but they would be sources of information. They would not be one of the 5 members. They would not be one of these 5 that are identified here.
Okay.
Ted, can I go back to the funding? I
Sure.
think we seem to have described this as an all or nothing proposition. So either we need 150,000 or there's probably not enough for this committee to get anything useful done. I don't think those are the only choices. I think what we're trying to allow for is for this committee to buy expertise. Because that's what we've determined that we need, both with the formation of this committee and with the engagement of a consultant. It seems to me, and I've been on both sides of this relationship, that if the committee decided that particular aspects of that charge could be met by a consultant relationship for $50,000, then you say, here's what we need done. We have $50,000. How would you propose to do this? I'm not sure I would conclude simply because we've got anecdotal information that other towns have spent $150,000 on this. One, either that we have to do that, or two, that it will cost us that much money to get a substantive result. So, again, I would urge you to allow for the flexibility for the committee to use this money in a way that it deems appropriate. I don't think they need startup money. I think they need the ability to purchase expertise at particular points if they see the need to do that, and I think $50,000 gives them some opportunity to do that.
And Anne Marie has already compiled an inventory of all the software and all hardware, and so that the committee will be well equipped to start. And we're hoping that they're going to bring expertise to the table. That's the whole goal here.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's certainly like,
Someone said something about a rush. There's no rush. We've been working on this for over 3 years, trying to get this thing going.
you're talking about the Town Government Study Committee working for 3 years to get
Prior to
an
the
IT
DOR.
committee
It was
article.
one of our original recommendations in the year 1.
Saw that,
Yep.
yes. That was 2 years ago.
Was-
Was when your recommendation came out. You may have been working on it for 3, but it's been public for 2. No, I mean, I think it's a fine idea to have an IT committee. I do wish that this article had been published with a price tag on it, so that we might have thought about it a little bit more in advance. You know, we were all, well, many of us were here last year. We had our doubts about the efficacy of a $50,000 grant to get an IT study going, and nothing happened. Well, we found out that the 50 wasn't going to work very well on its own. So it may be that nothing will, satisfactory would happen with a committee working without $50,000, and maybe you have to put the two together in order for anything, fruitful to occur. But I don't know that last year's experience left a lot of us, happy about the situation, and maybe seeing if a committee could come up with a realistic, targeted, dollar-specific plan by next, January for an appropriation the following year. That kind of makes sense to me. they'd have to get an article in for an appropriation by January. If you can get an IT committee up and running and putting in a request by then, that would be great. And I think that's, you know, that makes sense to me. So, but there's lots of other people around the table too, so.
Well, Ted, I think it depends on whether you think there's any time sensitivity or urgency to the deliberations that they might have and the need to move quickly. If you think that
Well,
that's not the case, then
I don't know, and I'm ready to admit that I might not be the best judge. I do know that the pressing concern has, in terms of town technology, has been solved, I think. Well, I hope, in terms of the financial software.
perspective, I think.
Okay. So I think the most pressing concern perhaps has a solution. As far as the other stuff, it is, I don't know what the problems are. Nobody is telling us, I mean, I think it's grand to have the committee, but nobody is telling me that the committee is essential because we have specific problems. So there is no sense of urgency in my mind beyond the one that we have a recommendation for the town school coordinating committee came up with a recommendation for the software package. And so I don't know where the sense of urgency is. I don't know, I mean, yes, I think it's great to get this thing going, but I don't know where the sense of, you know, I don't know what problems are driving anybody's sense of urgency about this. I would need to hear what the problems are that aren't being addressed, and how $50,000 is going to help address those problems more quickly. So, anyway. Anybody have any other questions on this? We are obviously coming back and talking more on Monday. I hate to postpone everything all the time. We have, I mean, the recommendations that are possible are that you can end it with recommending the formation of the committee and finish it with, and further that the town vote no appropriation under this article. Or you can end it with, and that the town appropriate the sum of blank dollars for the purposes set forth in this article, and to meet said appropriation, the sum can be raised. Now, we could change that to be raised from fiscal year 15 selectmen's budget, if we want to do that. So, I have a, Paul?
Ted, I'd like to make a motion that the committee recommend the writing for this article. It includes, and further, that the town vote no appropriation under this article.
Second.
I have a second. Any other questions? Darnell?
No appropriations for me is a problem when you're starting to try to identify issues throughout the town. You're going to need people to come in and do some investigation. You're going to need people to come in and study systems, because, you know, the type of expertise you're going to need to fish out and, you know, ferry out some of these problems. You're going to pay somebody to come in and do some short-term studies. You're going to pay. It's not going to be totally comprehensive, but I can foresee there are issues going forward with trying to get information or need somebody's expertise to come and evaluate outside evaluation. That costs money. It's going to cost money. It's not. It's not going to cost. I'm not going to see it costing $50,000, but I can see a number of different consultants needed. They're going to need to get paid to just basically give us the information we need to make further decisions. To do a zero funding on this article will basically, tie the hands of this committee if set up with the express purposes needed going forward. If we do no funding now, I recommend that we do put some money in our reserve fund so that they can come to us for RFTs to find funding if needed. But there's got to be some money available if we expect them to get anything done this year. There's got to be somewhere they can go or have an expectation of going to get funding to get some of that work done. So that's all I'm saying, because I can foresee going out and needing somebody coming from the outside. I have to pay somebody to get information that's not going to be available to a 5-person committee running around trying to understand what's happening here and what's actually available to them outside of what they see here right now.
Richard.
It's just not fair.
My only comment would be, I can understand the $50,000, but the $50,000 was, I can understand your comment, but the $50,000 had a specific purpose for the RFP. It wasn't for general.
The reprovisioning.
Right, but it wasn't for just generally hiring people to come in ad hoc. It was for a specific RFP. So, if anything, I would say, well, my two options would be either give the $50,000 so it sits there and waits for more, or put the $50,000 back into use somewhere else. I mean, I just don't I don't know why you would say, hey, give some things so that you could use. I mean, that's not what the $50,000 was for.
No, because right now, what the $50,000 was for originally, ends the end of this fiscal year. It just goes. What I'm saying is, we've already basically set that money into IT. I'm doing general IT, not just IT study, but general IT and IT research. I think by one or two ways, basically either moving that money directly into this committee when constituting it, and have them spend it and report back to us what it's getting spent on, because it's not just going to be spent willy-nilly. I'm sure we're going to have checks and balances against that, or understand that this committee is going to need funds to do this type of stuff, and we, as a committee, will be best service to put that money somewhere so they can come and write an RFT against it in the future. So I'm saying there's going to have to be some money available for this committee to basically do its job if we expect them to do anything within that first year. I mean, that's how I view it. So.
Well, within the first year, they'd have to get a more comprehensive strategy put together in terms of getting an article into the warrant by January 1st.
But
I've got Paul and I've got Lee Michael.
$50,000 was set aside last year and the yield was 0. So it also had a specific purpose. I think if the committee is established, they need to have the time. They're not going to be up and running right away, as Phil's pointed out, and I think that's correct. If they come back for an appropriation for more money for a specific purpose later, that's what they should be doing. They could conceivably, I don't know if this would work correctly, but they could conceivably be up and running to the point where maybe they can put in an appropriations article in the October meeting if they get up and running that quickly. But I think until they have a specific purpose for what they're going to do with the money, then I think it would be best to just leave that aside and allow them organically to go through their process and figure out exactly what they need, and then come back to town meeting with a specific sum for a specific appropriation.
Darnell.
Yeah, my problem with
I understand you think you ought to put $50,000
no. I say
into
we should
this
put
situation.
into this situation, because we're not just asking them to understand. We're not just asking.
What are we asking them to do?
We're asking them
That's gonna cost money. I wish somebody would tell me specifically.
Okay.
Okay.
Specifically, if you gave any 5 people in this room and said, "Go ahead, I want you to evaluate I just use something simple, is the Wi-Fi needs for the town, according to the number of systems we have, people who might be using it, the best solutions for the town, what we have, and evaluate those things. The committee here won't be able to give you those numbers because they won't have that expertise. All right, you put 5 people. Now you say, oh, we might find somebody who has some of that expertise. What's going to happen in the normal world is you're going to bring somebody in to do that evaluation, because evidently the folks you have doing it right now are not the folks that you want that independence, that you want an independent view on it. You're going to bring someone in to do that evaluation for you, who have the expertise, who can offer you the different solutions you need to get that stuff done. That's going to cost money. And all that information is going to go into a report that's going to come back and say to the Warrant Committee or to the town, the selectmen, and say, okay, guys, based on all the information we got, based on talking with consultants and professionals, this is what we need to go forward. And this is the type of things we need to have
You're
a
not
study.
going to get that for the $50,000.
But you're
That
gonna-
was
no,
already somewhat established.
No,
isn't it?
but Ted, what you're looking at is hiring a company to come in and do all the work, outside company coming in. Right now, what we're talking about is having a 5-person committee do some of that running around, some of that legwork that you're expecting someone to do all of that originally by themselves. So I'm gonna have you have outside company come in and do all that work. $125,000, I think, is generous, honestly, and have them come in, break down all your systems, and do everything else. What we're asking this 5-person committee to do, and this is, and Leroy, your guys correct me if I'm wrong, is to do some of that legwork, and where they run into snags, go outside and bring in professionals to fill the gaps. So that's what I'm hearing and understanding from this committee. So
On a piecemeal basis.
on a piecemeal basis. So
Okay.
yes, and so
All right.
if I'm not representing that properly, please tell me, because
Well,
I mean,
I think you're doing fine, but let me take one more crack at this. The simple answer to your question is, what are we asking them to do? We're asking them to oversee the development of a town-wide information technology strategic plan. We don't have one, we need one. We have hardware, different types of hardware in different departments. We have different types of software in different departments. We have software that's outdated, we've got operating systems that are outdated. We don't have an overall strategy. That affects what we buy, how we buy it, who makes the decisions. So I think everyone would agree that integration of that decision-making process and those purchases and that strategy going forward is a good idea. I don't think there's any argument there. So this committee, we're asking to oversee that, to provide the leadership that's necessary to get that done. We went through an RFP process. I agree, it didn't yield the results that we had hoped. But the money for that purpose was there, is there, and I'm just having a little trouble understanding how, since we thought that the purchase of that expertise would require money last time, that we're saying just because we don't know whether $50,000 is enough, and I'm not ready to concede that yet, but let's assume for the moment that's true. We shouldn't allocate anything. I'm not following the logic there.
Well, I think part of the logic is that last year, the money was being put into the selectmen's budget, and they were going to go out with an RFP, period. There was no committee being set up to consider the necessities for that, for a town-wide strategy on IT. This article is in theory, bringing some 5 intelligent people together that are versed in some of these
Absolutely.
these issues.
That's the idea.
And that's the difference between last year and this.
But we didn't think, and we don't think, that those people are going to be able to do all the work. This is a committee.
No, we think
that's
they're going to need
intended-
$125,000.
I'm not sure about that, Ted. I'm not sure about that.
It might be 75.
It might be 75.
Might be 40.
But it might be 45. But to Darnell's point, you can divide this into logical, smaller pieces that advance the overall task that don't get it done all at once. Like to say, we're not going to allocate anything. leaves them for months at a time with no funding, which doesn't make any sense. It's $50,000 that we had for this specific purpose.
Is it,
Okay, I still have a motion on the table, and I have Lee Michael and I have Steve asking questions. John, can you hang on?
oh, sure.
Thank you, I appreciate that, because they've been hanging on for quite a while. Lee Michael.
There are a couple of warrant committee members who have raised questions, and with respect to the amount of work that's already been done on this, most of this group of people is coming back on Monday night already. I thought you were going to go in this direction earlier, but we ended up getting the motion first. I wonder if we could allow them the opportunity, as we are on a couple other articles, to go and regroup and come back again with their rationale.
That's, you're asking Paul, who made the motion, to withdraw it in order to satisfy that.
Until Monday.
So without going to Steve or John or Rich, the question is to you. Would you care to withdraw that and pick this up again on Monday, next Monday?
I think I'd rather just hear what the rest of the people at the table have to say first.
Okay. I've got Steve and Richard. Steve and John and Richard, excuse me.
All right, I'm trying to get clear in my head here. We're proposing to use FY15 money to fund this.
Which hasn't been spent.
Which hasn't been spent. It hasn't been encumbered. Does it need to be encumbered by the end of the fiscal year?
It's in the budget. It's in the budget, and they have no contract, so it can't be encumbered. It has to be reappropriated by the town meeting.
It's an appropriation.
As an FY16 appropriation.
Steve, it's an FY16 appropriation from a prior year.
And that, you don't have to let it roll to free cash
No.
and then do it, you can just
No.
do it. And we're sure of that.
You can transfer.
That's what we do.
Yes, we should.
Okay.
Okay.
You know,
Amy's sure.
I would like to, Paul, to propose that we let this slide until Monday. You know, Phil made the point before that that this is possibly going to be even seeded is after town meeting. And, you know, we're going to be well into FY16. You know, you had floated the idea of them coming in fall town meeting and asking for an appropriation.
Which
that
doesn't
money will
fly.
be gone. There won't be any.
Right.
We ran into that problem last fall. So, you know, we either have to decide to put some 16 money to this, or just let them get started, let them get organized, started, and then come in with the full boat proposal or some piece of it later on. And I'm not ready to make that call myself right now, and I'd like that extra time to hear a little more information.
Okay, John?
I hope Paul's going to allow us to have some extra time, but just a little bit off the subject, from a point of history, it was 24 years ago that the town bought its first computer. Some of you may recognize this model, Radio Shack TRS-80.
Yes.
Nobody remembers it? And it was in the police department, $55,800, and it was funded by Copeland, Swift Fund, Milton Lodge of Masons, and several other groups and individuals. I don't think it's in service now. But what we haven't
Might be a
service.
doorstop, maybe.
Kevin, help me. We have a Braintree company who is our software provider.
Right, but they've changed their name.
That's right. And they've changed the name, but they're still our software we're using. Very old,
Right.
very archaic, insufficient, and Amy, our town accountant, and Jim Scory, our IT guy, came before the board and made a very emphatic plea to the town government study committee to get this IT stuff going again, get the committee going again, because that system is not going to be supported after next year.
That's
And
right.
that's the urgency that and Leroy mentioned it, but it didn't seem to register. There is an urgency that we get going on this, and I hope that you can see clear to transfer the funds that were appropriated for this general purpose to the new committee.
Okay, thank you. Richard?
Yeah, I'd be fine waiting until Monday, but I would say my answer will probably be the same Monday as it would be now. I think I was very confused with some of the conversations that we were having, but the last comment you made kind of put it in perspective for me, because it almost seemed like the $50,000, well, we couldn't get the RFP, so maybe things might come up, we might use it, but I think what I'm hearing from you is we may not have the RFP, but maybe we could slice it up in chunks and do things. So my point of view would be, I mean, I would vote for it because we've already appropriated money, as long as it gets used for what the purpose that we planned on it being used for. And it sounds like, or the portion of, which, you know what, is better than nothing because they're probably not going to get another $100 grand for a while from us.
Right.
So you might as well take the 50 and run with it. Right. And what I didn't understand is, from the beginning conversation, is I didn't know that that was possible. It almost sounded to me like the RFP is what it is. Right. You can't do anything about it, but it sounds to me like you probably could cut it up.
I think that's right.
So, I mean, it's up to you guys what you want to do, but I mean, that's a much better conversation than we were at 20 minutes ago.
I have Katie and Tom.
Yeah, just throwing out a suggestion. You know, we do have the capital committee is recommending $160,000 for a piece of software that really, when we get all said and done, is going to cost between $250 and $275. You know, 50 grand repurposed into that software is a known commodity. Does buy us another module for that software that we certainly could use, and gets it a little bit further. But perhaps if this IT committee, at least to give it some money to get started with, because I strongly believe by the time you strategize and get the committee established, you're going to be well into next year before it really gets much accomplished. But to maybe take that 50 grand and give 10 or 15 to the IT committee and repurpose the rest of it to the new accounting software, to make that 160, something closer to 200.
Oh, okay. So we have another wrinkle. All right.
Too many options.
Katie, did you have something to add, or that was Tom? Okay. Thank you. Paul?
Given the conversation around the table, I'll withdraw my motion.
So we'll come back Monday on this thing. And
Okay, and I don't know. I hope I'm not just speaking for myself. I really appreciate your time putting all this stuff together. I really wish that $50,000 price tag had been attached to that article when it was presented to us on paper in January, because it would have helped us prepare for this evening. And I would really like to see some example of how the job of this committee could put $50,000 to use. Whether it's in $5,000 pieces or what. But I would like to see some sort of a idea on that, because otherwise I'm just feeling like last year was 50 without a committee, and this year at least we got a committee. How are they going to do anything more than 50 than the Board of Selectmen?
Agreed.
So, at any rate, thank you very much for coming in, Rick, and we'll pick it up. And on Monday we do have, before, just to let you know, on Monday the first thing we're going to be doing is hearing from a citizen's petition on a moratorium on signs. Okay, so that'll be first, and but I hope. Can't be as confusing as this one, so what the hell.
Thank you.
Thanks.
This is a great question for Rotary, wasn't it?
so that's still on.
All right. I'd like to have a 5-minute break and come back and take care of a few things. Okay? Thanks.